Welcome to the Integrate This EdTech podcast. I'm Jeremy Mikla, and I'm joined by always as co-host David Berner. And our special guest here with us today is Sabba Quidwai. We're really thrilled to have you with us, Sabba. And one of the things like we try to do is let the guest kind of tell their story a little bit about how did you get to this place that you're at, from moving from the classroom into areas of innovation, working with Apple and helping to design schools, and like what connects all of that stuff together to where we are today.
You know what connects all those pieces together is literally my own journey as a student, having to figure out the world of work when you graduate feeling unprepared. I feel like that's probably the easiest way to put it. So, first of all, thanks for having me here. I'm so excited to chat with you both. And so, yes, I always say, like, I've had many roles, like you just listed many of them. But I think what really drives a lot of my work is my own experience as a student. I graduated in 2007, which was literally a couple of months before the recession. And it was also the year of the iPhone launch. So, looking back now, you realize that mobility played such a huge role in a lot of the technology that we use today that we honestly don't even think twice about. But not even just mobility, what really transformed a lot of the things to allow us to be more mobile in how we work, how we learn, and all those different things was the App Store and the app economy. And it's so crazy to think that there was a world before the App Store, because today there's like an app for everything that we use. Like, I feel like before we're even out of the door in the morning, we've already used probably like 5 or 6 different applications. But one of the things that I really struggled with early on, I would graduate as a high school history teacher, was I didn't feel like I knew how to use technology for academic and professional opportunities. I had a lot of technology in my personal life. My dad was, we had like video cameras growing up, like we had every single technology available, but I had never really made that connection between personal use and academic and professional use. And so when I graduated, I feel like while I was very well versed in like project-based learning, because that's pretty much what my program was all about, I didn't really know how to use technology to accelerate those kinds of experiences and opportunities. In fact, I was actually very much the opposite. Even though I used a lot of technology in my personal life, I was not somebody who could really understand why you would want to use technology for school. Like, why do kids need to be on devices? Like, even when iPads came out, like I was very much like, why do we need this? Like, and it was a line I had read in 2010 from Seth Godin that really helped shift my perspective, because I kept getting layoff notices. So like I graduated in 2007, but obviously when the recession hit in 2008, I got a layoff notice. I got a pink slip again in 2009. Like, it was just year after year. And I almost quit the profession and went into marketing. And because I was researching marketing, I came across Seth Godin and a book that he had written called Linchpin. And in the book Linchpin, he basically was like, that world of work, like you graduate, go to school, get good grades, it's dead. Like, it expired and no one told you. And so it's very interesting, even now, for me to listen to a lot of people that talk about work and how things are changing for entry level jobs, to now you're hearing the same narrative that Seth Godin said was dead in 2010, and people are acting like it just died in 2025 or 2022 when ChatGPT came around. So I think a lot of my own experience, like I actually was that person, I was that graduate. And then
Mhm.
Seth Godin's book had this one line that was basically like, today's world doesn't want people that like know things. They need people who are linchpins, basically, your problem solvers. You can go into organizations and you can almost see like white spaces. You are not somebody who just sees a problem. You're somebody who comes up with a solution. And you don't just come up with a solution, you know how to like build momentum with people around you to be able to get to where you want to go. And so that one book really changed the first half of my career. I became a lot more interested in technology. I was like, okay, fine, I don't know how to use it, but it's a challenge. Clearly, people don't know what to do with, so I'm going to help build a solution. And just my own experience and embracing it in that way really changed my own perspective on technology and how powerful it can be. And then I became obsessed. And then I couldn't stop writing about it online and whatnot. And then the second thing that really, I think, changed the second half of my career that led me to where I am now was a book in 2014 by Eric Brynjolfsson and Andrew McAfee. And the last line of the book was called The Second Machine Age. And the last line of the book was, technology is not destiny. We shape our destiny. And the whole book was about AI and how that was going to be the next big wave of technology that was going to transform the economy and everything else. They're both economists who wrote the book. And it made me really curious, because I was like, okay, I wasn't prepared for the last thing. I want to absolutely not just myself be prepared for AI and what comes next, but how do we help schools prepare as well? So in 2017, I went back to school to do my doctorate, to basically research what are the skills and mindsets we would need to be successful in the age of AI.
Yeah, and I can really tell from the way that you're talking is you have those moments or those key books you were definitely influenced by, but you weave your personal narrative through that too. And is that how you're approaching AI too? Is that we need to be using it kind of as with that lens of our personal narrative to make sure that it does focus on that human centeredness and that approach towards it?
Yeah, it's so funny. We're getting ready to do a webinar tomorrow, and it's like literally one of the biggest pieces in there. I actually think one of the biggest missed pieces with AI is we start too quickly with the technology and the tool, and we don't spend enough time thinking about ourselves. So I think if you don't have, and I think this is why you have fear with AI. It's great to obviously you want to have fear around jobs, environment, and those kinds of challenges. But if you ever have a fear around your own identity and the fact that AI can replace you as a person, I always say it's probably because you just haven't had enough time to reconnect with your purpose, what brings you meaning, and how you can really be valuable in doing what it is you want to do. Because I guarantee you it's not making a slide deck sitting at your computer or writing emails or any of that kind of monotonous work that we're often, spending most of our time doing. So I really encourage people to, create that about me statement, to lean into what are my values, what are the teaching practices and pedagogies that I'm really passionate about integrating that I want to do more of. And I think when you start from there, you realize that we're not even scratching the surface on what we can do and how AI can then be a partner with you in doing more of what it is you hope to do.
Yeah, and one of the things that you mentioned in there is like the mindset shift, or what is the things that you see as you've been looking at AI and schools? And one of the things that we see a lot is schools tend to be really slow systems, and they take a while to change some things. So, what have you seen, or what things have you done that would have been successful in terms of getting those shifts to happen? Because we do see so much tool adoption right away, because it's the easiest thing. It's like the easiest entry point, and we always realize too, like teachers need time with the tools that they're going to be using. But how do you balance those things of like the tool side versus like actually getting the whole system to shift?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll tell you something else that's like really funny is every industry thinks they're slow to adopt. So education's like, oh my God, we're so slow. I work with real estate, they're like, oh, we're so slow. We work with medicine, they're like, oh, we're so slow. We work with finance, they're like, oh, we're so slow. So let me tell you, every single industry thinks they're slow. And really, it's not about being slow. It's really about like being intentional, right? Like I think those you don't want to misread those two words and confuse the two words and what they are. So I think with schools, it's usually people want to be intentional, but I think a lot of times it's just a lot of fear that can sometimes come in the way of the intentions that you have and how you bring people along. So I'll tell you step number one, the challenge that we see or the gap that we see, and when you solve for it, it helps, is no story. People don't want a story about AI. They want a story about them, their community, and their vision. And the first thing we always do when we work with anybody is we'll go to your website, we'll pull up your vision statement, and we'll be like, here it is. You have it already. Like there's so many things that people already have that they just don't realize. And so a lot of early work that we do with people is putting together pieces. Let's look at all the pieces that you have. People have different things. Some people have learner profiles. Some people have vision statements. Some people have strategic priorities. Like everybody has a story already. It likely isn't in a story format ready for you to tell. It's likely in a vision statement. It's in a graphic. It's hidden in your documents somewhere. So the first thing you want to do is pull out a story for why this technology can help you be more of who you are as an individual, as an organization, and as a community. And what that does is it creates shared language for every single person in your organization and community, from families to classified, certificated, to students, to everybody. So this to me is the biggest missing gap, which is why people usually bring me in for a keynote. And then I'll come in with a keynote and I'll have like a story for you. And now you'll have a mindset shift. So story is like the most human element that you can bring into the equation to calm people's fears, but also ignite hope, opportunity, and optimism, and all of those different elements. So that's number one. Number two is I think how people are introduced to AI makes or breaks the mindset that comes next. Because at the end of the day, you don't know what you don't know. And I'll tell you how I learned this recently. I mean, I've always been really opposed to the magic school, brisk school AIs of the world, not because I think they're bad tools, but because I think they give people a bad representation of what AI is and where it is going. And if you don't have that understanding, you then think those tools are AI. And yes, they are a version of it, but it's not anywhere close to the technology and its goals for what it hopes to become. So the other day I was on Instagram and I saw this, like, you know how like when posts go viral, like they pop up in everyone's feed. So I saw a post about a teacher who was like, do you think it's weird that districts block TPT, but they're pushing us all to magic school? And you should have seen the comments on this post. There were hundreds,
Mhm.
hundreds of teachers asking two things. I would say about 80% of the teachers were in agreement. So first of all, I didn't know so many districts had started blocking TPT, which is teachers pay teachers, if you don't
Mhm.
know. But the fact that these teachers were making a correlation to teachers pay teachers and magic school right away tells you what their impression of AI is, right? Like I would never make that correlation. But if your impression of AI is that it's a answer generator, it's a creator of things for you, not with you, then it makes total sense why you would make that correlation. So they're basically saying, well, why wouldn't I just go buy ready-made something from a teacher who's a real human versus pushing a button and getting something from an AI that's not a human and not supporting a human either? So if this is your baseline foundation of what AI means in your district, you cannot go up from there. You just simply cannot. It's going to be an uphill battle. So the very first thing you want to do is really give people an understanding of the technology, not just where it is today, but also where it's going, because somebody who is using Magic School and School AI has absolutely no clue, will never be able to wrap themselves head around co-work or Claude or code or any of the other things that we're seeing literally right now, not even futuristic elements, things that are happening right now. So these are probably the two biggest mistakes that I see happening right now.
So when I remember reading something that you had written, oh, it was a while back, and I don't even remember what it was for. But you talked about, we need to stop seeing AI as a tool and start seeing it as a teammate. And I think, is this part of the solution to help people move beyond just what they can get from Magic School, School AI, Brisk, any of those numbers that you mentioned it in that little last response, but into what can we do with it now? How can we use it to help advance not just our instructional practices and creating experiences for students to learn from, but maybe even to challenge our own thinking?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really about creating a system for people, right? So, like, one of the things we don't want to do, like, in education, we already work in silos. So, the last thing we want to do is have people go building teams in silos, right? Like, now everybody's like
Mhm.
off with their own little AIs, doing their own little thing. What we really want to do is start looking at, like, where is the opportunity to scale best practices? And there was a really good book written on this. Jill Mehta, who's a professor at Harvard, had a doctoral student, Sarah Fine, who now teaches at High Tech High. And this was before AI, before everything, before COVID even. And they wrote a book called In Search of Deeper Learning. And back then, I'm sure you guys remember, it was all the rage, was like 21st century schools preparing for the 21st century and whatnot.
Mhm.
And so they did a study on, let's go look at the breakdown of a 21st century school. What are they doing? Da da da. And what they ended up saying in their book was there actually was no such thing as a 21st century school. What there was pockets of excellence in every school, but awful practices in every school where kids are doing worksheets and things like that as well. So to me, the opportunity I see with AI is like you can take those best practices, those pockets of excellence, and you can package them into an agent, a gem, a whatever it is that you want to do, and scale that out to everybody by creating a system, by creating basically a bunch of teammates that they can work with. So I'll give you a really good example. Is, for example, like Harvard's visible thinking routines. One of the things that we hear so much these days is metacognition, process of a product, change your assessment. It's a very hard thing for most people to do because they likely don't have the practices, the strategies, XYZ. However, if you go in and create a bunch of teammates that are trained on, let's just say, the visible thinking routines from Harvard's Project Zero, you literally could create an entire set of practices that you could just hand out to people tomorrow. They don't even have to be super well versed in like what they all are and whatnot, but they do have to be well versed in implementation, which I find that most people are able to do once they get a strategy, which is why teachers pay teachers works really well because they can buy a strategy to implement. It's the implementation and application that's hard for them, not the that's easy for them, not the thinking piece of it. We know what works, we know the strategies, we know the pedagogy, but having the time to actually sit there and apply that to your practice and then implement and integrate it, this is hard. So what has teachers pay teachers done for people? It's packaged up the resources for you so you can focus on implementation. You can do this with a much, much, much higher bar using AI tools, but doing it yourself for your community based on your practices, your vision, your graduate profile, whatever your pieces are. And instead of leaving people with just the ready-made package, you can then, it gets people excited to then want to make changes. So then what we find is people will come back and be like, well, can I make it do this? Can I make it do that? And that's the agency piece now, right? Now they're not talking about tools. They're talking about what they need and the problems they want solved, or the ideas they have, or what they'd like to see be implemented and created. And you can almost reverse engineer how you learn AI. So instead of teaching people like, how to prompt and how to do all these things, which there's a time and a place for that. But if you're worried about time, and if you're not in this place already, you should be worried about time. I think reverse engineering how people learn can create more agency, more ownership, and just more autonomy and motivation in getting people invested in building their own tools.
So then, it forces them to kind of create their own story,
Yep.
then that they're going to turn around and say, look what this was able to do for me, right? And then it can spill over into that classroom next, maybe help break down that silo a little bit more, when they can share the different ways that they're able to use their teammate to, improve it. And what's interesting too is that when you're talking about, you're using AI to help you with some of the content related things, some of the curricular related things, perhaps. The teacher is still their content expert, though, so they know what to include and not include. And it's really comes down to whether they're getting the content from Teachers Pay Teachers or from an AI agent of some sort. It still comes down to how they're going to implement it. So they still need to be their pedagogical experts. They still need to understand, where their students are at and how to best meet their needs.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest differentiator is you get to really personalize based on strategies and practices that matter to you. Because everywhere I go, people have different things they're implementing, different strategies they're trying, different frameworks they've adopted. And I think, and to me, this is again a really great example of showing people like the human work of things. When you bring, say, like a fifth grade department team together, or you bring a ninth grade English team together, and you start sharing, okay, what's working for you? What rubrics would you like to scale? What practices do you wish we could do more of? And you're like sitting there curating all of that information into, say, like Notebook LM, and now everybody gets access to that notebook. You've basically given everybody access to this like brain, right? Which is now going to power your AI tools. So instead of it sort of just being like something that you're just like getting from the internet, or that you haven't trained, or that doesn't know you and how you work, your quality of answers are just night and day. So when people really start training and thinking of building like a system, like, okay, this is our intelligence layer, this is our application layer, this is our distribution layer for how we're going to give things out, which by the way is all free for most people with Gemini. Like at some point, yes, if you really start to get aggressive about these strategies, you're going to have to upgrade and pay for the plan. But the fact that they've given people access to building a system like this for free is they're really the only people who have done it like properly, kind of with like a little bit of a, no expiration date, so to speak. And so I just think there's a lot of power right now in being able to step back from just looking at things as isolated tools and being like, how does this work as a system to support people with the goals towards our vision? And I think when you give that to people, it's harder. And the benefit to it being harder is nobody thinks AI is easy anymore. When your version of AI is click buttons and it generates something for me, yeah, that's why you have a lot of people that think AI is cheating, because they see students using it the same way. So when you engage people in work that's a little bit harder, which I find people are hesitant to do because they're scared that, oh, it's going to be too much for them. They just need step one, they're afraid. But I actually find that when you challenge people more, they rise to the occasion and they're more interested in doing harder things than they are in doing easier things.
Do you think this AI mindset here is scalable to students as well? And if so,
Absolutely.
when in that journey, is it already in elementary, or do they need to wait till high school to be able to experience that?
Oh my God, so many people ask me that question, and I feel like it is very contextual. It's really hard for me to say, and also because I don't like to say anything that I don't do myself. So I'll be really honest, like when it comes to my niece and nephew, we don't do any AI. The only thing we did recently was we bought my nephew a MacBook Neo. So I'm a big fan of this new MacBook they brought
Mhm.
out, because I think they've made so many things accessible to people that I don't think are with a Chromebook and other types of tools. But there's three reasons I got my nephew a MacBook Neo, and he's 7. Number one is he loves 3D printing. So he has a 3D printer. He's always using his dad's laptop. Now he can go in and 3D print on his own. Number two, my own experience using Claude Code and noticing my own vulnerability because I don't know how to code made me be like we need to double down on this. And it's interesting because this is also a time, I think, when a lot of people are saying, oh, you don't need to know how to code, and you don't. And the best analogy I give people is, you have a new species on Earth, whatever you want to call it, like whatever you want to say it is, you have a new entity on Earth that works with us, and they're not going anywhere, but they have a different language, and their language is code, right? Python, HTML, whatever you want to call it. They know our language. They can speak to us in French and English and Spanish and Arabic and whatever you want to say. If you don't know code, you don't speak their language. And it's almost like being in a foreign country where like you kind of sort of know it, like, oh, I speak Spanish. I can get by. I can order this. I can order that. But when you don't know the nuances, let's say you're in Spain and you think you can speak Spanish, or you think you can read a menu, because maybe you do speak and read Spanish, but you're allergic to something and you miss that's lost in translation between you and the waiter, that one word, that one ingredient, and now all of a sudden your EpiPen comes out because you had an allergic reaction. When you work with AI agents, there is no EpiPen for you. There is no moment for you unless something really drastic happens where you may even notice that there was a hack or a vulnerability that you were exposed to. So it's not, so yes, can anybody go in and type in natural language and build? Absolutely. Can they identify very nuanced vulnerabilities? No, I don't believe so. I haven't been able to. I've made mistakes. Claude is the one that's correcting me as we're working and being like, hey, Sabba, don't do that. Hey, Sabba, you put this API pin in here. Don't do that. Go revoke this in XYZ. Claude's taking care of me versus me being the one in charge of it. So I think coding is really, really, really important to learn as a language. And number three, voice. I think voice is the future. And I think this is a very hard thing to even bring into conversation unless people are really ready for it, because most people can't even let go of typing and writing. But voice, without a doubt, is the future. Your ability to articulate your ideas, your ability to see a problem, all building off of, right, the same ideas that I just talked about with Seth Godin and Linchpin, are becoming more and more and more and more and more important. Some people will write to think, some people will type to think, some people will draw to think, some people will use voice to think. And one of the things that I think is so awesome about voice, all kids know how to talk. Like once they know how to talk, they're ready to go. And I think writing is actually a limitation in many ways to children and their agency, because they have ideas, but they don't have the ability to always articulate it. So hit F5 on that Mac, tell your AI tools what you want to build, what you want to do, and you're learning how to code. This is agency. I think actually talking out loud makes me say, if your experience with technology is amplifying agency and you have a very clear through line through how you are building agency within a child, then go for it. Otherwise, I do think I am in that party that believes that using AI will make people think less, not because I think AI is the problem, but because I think the way experiences are designed are the problem. And so if you're not taught how to brainstorm properly, if you're not taught how to use it as a teammate properly, if somebody's not scaffolding out that experience for you in a very methodical way, I am of that party that believes it's more problematic than it is helpful.
I think I want to just ask you a little bit about like the coding part, because I had a very similar experience with some stuff that I was doing, and Jeremy knows about this, but we were working on some projects, and I don't know anything about coding either, but through using like V0 Dev, if you're familiar with that, and now obviously like the way that the large language models have progressed, they have the ability in there as well to create and code and creating websites and things like that. So we've seen all that. What has been your experience with the coding? Because for me, it's been one of the most challenging and rewarding things that I've done, because of the fact that I didn't know what an API key was. I didn't know any of that stuff. So I had the same exact experience where it was like giving me errors, and I was like, okay, well, help me fix the error, and because I knew in my head, I had this picture of what I wanted to create like around AI, and so, but it was just a picture in my head at that point. So then I'm like working with V0 Dev to kind of explain things and give it images and things that would represent what I was trying to build. And then eventually we got to it, but it did take, hours upon hours of me working with it. And this was last year, so obviously it's gotten much better. But what was your experience with things that you've built in that same process?
Yeah, so I would say I was way behind you because I had a huge mindset block in my head, even though I heard all these people. And I think this is why starting with the technology is problematic and not starting with the story, because you don't hook people. So even though I had heard about like vibe coding and this and that from so many people, I saw it at conferences, I saw it in all these places, I just kept hearing about the technology and I didn't really keep hearing. I just kept hearing you can build things, do things, whatever. But in my head, because I had such a mindset block towards, well, I don't know how to code, I don't know how to do that, I just simply didn't believe it. And it wasn't until co-work came out from Claude in February of this year that I was finally like, okay, you know what? I'm going to just step in and do that. But I would say it took me a lot of months just to do the mindset work to get over the fear of, okay, no, you can do this. So that was number one. So I was way behind you. Second, I feel like I have a whole new vocabulary. Like there are all these words that I just didn't know and phrases that I didn't know and things that I just didn't know that like then now I do. And so one of the things I do find between all people who have been building and have been doing things, I think there's a real testament to building is learning. We all
Yeah.
love to build. It's such a deeply human feeling of accomplishment, of challenge, of hard. That's why I'm saying people enjoy hard things versus easier things. So I would say this is a real testament to what happens for agency when you allow people to build and you engage them in the messiness of learning, no matter what their age is. This is number two. Number three, I just don't understand how it was not made a language that you could choose, how it was not categorized as a foreign language, because it is a language. And Apple used to say it all the time, right? Like coding is the language of technology. Everyone should know the language to build something that can change the world, which sounds so aspirational 10 years ago, 15 years ago. But today, here we are. Who are the people that are building things that can change the world? Software developers, people who know how to code. Because while you can build something, the real question to ask is, can you deploy and monetize something? And if you can't do the latter part, yeah, sure, there's a time and place you might build like a fun recipe thing for your family or something like that. But at the end of the day, if you can't monetize, you don't have access to new careers and new jobs. And so I think that's another thing a lot of people are afraid to say, like, no, this is just about learning. Yes, it's about learning, but we also have to learn how to make money, because if you don't learn how to make money, you don't get employed, and then we have an entry-level job problem and whatnot. So this has been probably some of the most interesting things to me. And I think if you understand the vulnerability you have with coding, you will double down, hopefully, on making sure that we don't repeat that same mistake with AI, because that's what I see now. If you didn't know how to code, okay, you could kind of sort of get by. I think if we don't start giving people AI skills, and by those AI skills doesn't necessarily mean put them in front of a chatbot, I think you're going to create a vulnerability that will make people obsolete in society. That is very hard to recover from, I think, especially if you're young. Um, yeah, so that's been my experience. It's made me double down even more on many of the things that I've been talking about.
Yeah, I know for me too, like I wouldn't have like the coding thing, I would have done that if this wasn't available. It just wasn't in my wheelhouse, and so I never approached it. But then because of that access to it, then I was like, I'll just try it and see what happens. And and did it go well? No, not at first, but then eventually you get to it, and through all the different challenges that came about, it just got better and better as I went. And obviously too, like you said, you start to pick up on things like different keys, and maybe Duolingo needs to get on this, but with the a language for coding, right? But that's what my experience was, and it sounds very similar for you. But I think I would love to see more and more people approach that, and I'm looking forward to doing that more with some of the things that become available too. But
Yeah, no,
so
same here. I'd say the other thing, that I've also learned, like, there's a difference between like building and doing. And I think a lot of people, when they talk about coding and they talk about AI with this capability, it's very much about humans building. But I don't think people realize this is how also agents are doing. So the biggest shift for me has been, I think for the longest time, we've heard that promise of AI that will do things for you. It will, it will make things, it will do things for you, right? Like it will take tasks off your plate. And I think working with Claude Code and Cowork, it's still really hard to wrap your head around. AI can do things. And one of the things that I think is really a big problem in society right now, which is what happens also, I think, when you're not educated about where AI is going, you don't know how to advocate for yourself because you don't know what you don't know. And I think right now, the fact that education doesn't have access to this technology, okay, I just don't, there's no one to advocate for that because you don't have enough people who are using it. Even the people who are in charge of these technology organizations and whatnot, ask them, what are you building? What are you doing with Claude? Like, have you tried co-work? Oh no, I haven't done that yet. well, guess what? If you don't do this and you don't understand what has happened in the last 12 months, how in the world are you going to advocate for any kind of policy change or even just how to get these kinds of things in people's hands? So one of the things you do is you don't necessarily need that exact platform. But again, I go back to, I think what Google have done is so generous because you can pretty much take the experience you're having in Claude and co-create it for people inside of the Gemini ecosystem. It's a little bit of DIYing because some of their pieces I think are a little bit more fragmented than Claude, which has like just integrated a lot of things so you're not thinking about them twice. But you can take the same experience and replicate it as a system inside of Gemini.
Do you think schools, though, limit some of the availability of students, especially, but maybe even to some extent to teachers, because they tend to be very rules based, and and
Yeah.
and and I get why, right?
Yeah.
But so how do you find those pockets of innovation or avenues of innovation where, teachers could really lean into if they want to be able to, really take advantage of some of the different types of things here that, both you and David have both been talking about. I feel like I've just kind of been listening in on some of that stuff and getting excited about it. But, what can be done there?
Yeah, I think, so much of it to me goes back to knowledge. I think the one, benefit you have in education is you don't have to keep up with every single latest thing that's happening, right? And give it to people. When we think about AI, we can really think about it in two ways, right? Like you have your adults and then you have your young people, and they each need similar experiences, but they each also need different experiences. If you're 5 or if you're 15 or if you're 20, you need very different experiences and training than say somebody who's already established in a profession and in an industry. And so there is a moment where you can like really be like, okay, this is what's happening, but these are the skills that matter. So one of the things that you realize when you listen to people is curiosity is one of the top listed skills. You don't really build curiosity by sitting in front of a screen, right? Teamwork is really, really, really an important skill. Not even anymore just teamwork between humans, but teamwork between humans and AI technology, right? So we haven't even nailed one of them yet. Collaboration is always cited as one of the biggest problems or barriers that people have to innovation and things like that. So we haven't even solved for one type of collaboration, and now you've got a whole other one you have to deal with too. So I think a lot of these skills are taught without technology. And one of the reasons I tell people to lean into this is I think I think too many people are discounting the anti-tech backlash that we're seeing right now. Really started with that Jonathan Haidt, but now you have this new guy called Horvath. I think that's his name. And I think what really sucks is there's so much validity to what they say. And when I look at our side, I don't know that we have a good compelling story or a good narrative that's going to win people over because we've taken such a tool-based approach to things. That guy ripped iReady apart. Like it's and you can't refute him. He's right in what he's saying. Yet look around at how many people have kids every single day on iReady, just going through the app and going through the thing and calling that technology and learning. So I think there's just like so much messiness right now that if you don't educate people properly on what is happening, where is the technology going, what is coming next, you almost can't even build a strategy if your foundation is incorrect or you're not working with the
Mhm.
right building blocks and the right pieces of information. So to me right now, I feel like such an important thing is like educate people on what's happening because you can tell the fact that NYC just put out guidelines saying you may do this tells you how not knowledgeable people are. Because if you think you can still go to a kid and you may use AI here and you may not use it here, good luck. If that's your strategy, good luck. But then don't be surprised tomorrow when people have anti-tech backlash, things don't work out well, your kids don't use the tools properly, because it really speaks to the fact that how little you understand that agency is now shared between humans and machines. And nobody builds agency by saying you can and can't do this when I tell you to, because I'm treating you like a car and telling you red, yellow, green. I just don't understand the logic.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that perspective, and I think hopefully with some of the stuff that's coming out with Dr. Horvath and the Jonathan Haidt, and that maybe that will provide opportunities for more conversations of how we should be approaching things versus what we've been doing so long with the just shoving tools at everyone
Yeah.
for so long. So maybe we'll have opportunities for that. I do want to really thank you for your time and the conversation and the insights that you've provided. I did want to give you an opportunity before we end here is there anything that you have coming up that you want to plug, like events or socials, just different things that we can put in our show description to help you out and send people your way?
Yeah, I would say, I think the podcast is one thing it's first of all, it's the one thing most people share that they enjoy. So I would say the podcast, because every single week we break down for you what's happening. Here's the news, but not just like, oh, this happened, this happened, this happened, contextualizing it for you. And we talk a lot on the podcast about students and a lot about like just entrepreneurship and the opportunities that are available and the trends that we're seeing and how a lot of people right now really think that there's no answers, that everything's so new, that we don't know what to do because everything's so new. And like, this is just very incorrect. Like, yes, there's a lot of unknown, but there's also a lot in the research, in the evidence, in work that people are currently doing that gives us direction for where to move forward one step at a time. And I think when you have that forward moving direction, things then organically will allow you to make the right choices, will put you around the right people to have more I think just accurate information to make decisions about what to do. So the podcast is really, it's one of my favorite things to do each week, as it forces me to sit down and learn and contextualize. And it's one of the things that we get a lot of feedback on from people.
Great. We'll be sure to put that in our description as well, and so people can check out your podcast and some of the things that you've done with like design schools and that. So again, we really appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah,
Thanks,
you're
Sabba.
welcome. Thanks for having me.